All right, Alexander, let's answer the questions from the live stream we did with Anya. And let's begin with Tabernac, who says, great victories in Kanai and Donbass do not always translate into desired political victory. Italy was never going to flip, and neither is Europe.
Well, I don't think we're talking about flipping. And I mean, if you're talking about political victories, what exactly do you mean by that? If you're talking about the Russians, expanding their influence across Europe, I don't think that's their concern. I mean, their concern at the moment is sorting out this festering problem, which is Ukraine. If they can win a victory there and solve the problem of Ukraine once and for all, then I think they'll be very happy with that outcome. And as I said, what Italy's going to do, what other countries are going to do in Europe, I don't think that really concerns the Russians that much anymore.
All right, Mega, thank you for the super sticker. Colin Jones says, welcome back to Clown World, Alex, the dynamic duo back to wreak sanity upon the dismal Western leaders. Thank you for that. Angelo, thank you for that super sticker. Red Viking, thank you for that super sticker. McClenko, thank you for that super chat. Kajan, welcome back, Alex, thank you. Sparky says, great to have you back, Alex. Commander Crossfire says, the truth doesn't damage points of views that are legitimate. The MSM reach billions of viewers with budgets in the billions of dollars, and yet Alex sees a threat to their narrative. How weak.
True enough.
Commander Crossfire. David S., thank you for that super sticker. Poppy, thank you for that super sticker. Kenk Yoger says, do you believe an end to U.S. hegemony could possibly bring about the end of the excess of social progressivism, aka wokeness? It would be worth it.
Well, at the moment, it probably would if we saw that. I mean, if this whole system that we've seen created over the last few years were to collapse, then I mean, it might quite easily work out like that. The only thing I would say is, firstly, it's become very embedded in the West, so we might still see it continue in the West at least for a while. But also, I'm sorry to say this, I mean, things like this have a habit of coming back at some point. I mean, this isn't the first time in history that we've seen, these kind of ideas floating to the surface. So, I'm not going to say that they would never return, but I think that the energy behind this at the moment would probably slacken off.
Angry Warhawk says, do you foresee the special relationship between the USA and Britain ever ending?
I think the relationship between Britain and the US will always be extremely close because, of course, there's so many connections. I mean, there's language, there's law, systems of law, habits of mind, things of that kind. But I think it might one day happen that the US decides that this relationship with Britain is a burden for the US and a complication for the US rather than a source of strength. I don't see the British themselves ever taking any step to end it.
Sanjeva says, Yellen either doesn't understand Indian diplomacy or just lying when she said talks about oil price cap was encouraging. Ambassador Vohra clarified that India never voices an opinion and shouldn't be confused with support.
Why are the two contradictory? I mean, she may be, to some extent, telling less than the truth, lying, in other words, and at the same time misunderstanding Indian diplomacy. I think it's both.
From Zionik, welcome Anya. Welcome back from exile, Alex. PK says, Alex, put a shoe over your head so we can be sure this is live. Commander Crossfire says...
it was live.
Yeah, it was live. Alexander says, what's given can be easily taken away, like sovereignty. Lithuania, like sovereignty.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. By the way, the words are from the Anglican funeral service.
From Kalin, I love you guys. Thank you so much. Welcome back, Alex. I got banned too recently. The censorship is ramping up, it seems. Thanks for inviting Anya. Yes, it is. Swagata says, do you actually think an incident will be created like Lusitania in 1917 to propel the U.S. into World War III? Is that the end game of the globalists?
It could be. I mean, something like that might happen. I mean, I should say that I think there's been a lot of studies about the Lusitania incident, and I think it's now universally accepted that the accounts that were given at the time, that this was just a steamship with passengers, civilian ship, which was, targeted in an unprovoked attack by the Germans. I think most people now accept that that wasn't true. But anyway, having said that, will we have a similar incident this time? I don't think it will ever be exactly the same. And I have to say, I think it's more likely that we could see a military clash of some sort, more like the affair of the Maine in Cuba in the 1890s, when this US warship, experienced an explosion in Havana Harbor, and that led to a war between the United States and Spain, and that story has never been fully clarified either. So I think that's a more likely prospect, or a Gulf of Tonkin type thing, than a Lusitania one. But something like that, I'm afraid it's all too possible.
Sanjeva says, it's awesome to have Anya on the Duran. Hope she keeps coming back. By the way, did you notice Indian media, even the ones owned by the Anglo-Indians, turning sympathetic to Russian perspective?
I think this was discussed over the course of the program.
Discussed.
Actually, that I think we did. I mean, I've seen it myself, but as I think one of our commentators said, who's Indian, I mean, they can shift around quite radically, and there is still a strong current of pro-American feeling in India from people like the business people in Mumbai, for example.
From Jeffik, what do you believe the West endgame will be once they realize that Ukraine has lost not just the war but Ukraine itself? Will Poland intervene?
This is the huge unanswered question. My own view is that the Polish government considered this idea and has considered it at some points during the conflict. But I think that they've increasingly come under pressure from some European countries not to go there, because I think there's a concern that if Polish troops are introduced into Ukraine, the Russians have said that they would target them. At that point, there might be calls from Poland for help under Article 5 of the war. No, not Article 5. I'm sorry. Well, it might be. No, it is Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. In other words, they might ask for help under the NATO guarantees. And I think that countries in Europe, Western Europe, do not want to have to come to the help of the Polish army in that kind of situation and involve themselves in a direct conflict with Russia. So for the moment, I think this idea, I don't think it's been completely dropped, but I think it's been scaled down. And from our conversations with Anya, I get the sense that this would be pretty controversial in Poland as well. So I don't think it's on the agenda at the moment, but it might be revived at any time, and we can't assume that it won't be.
All right. Aleko, thank you for that super sticker. Paulie says the Dutch Minister of Nitrogen has financial interests in body supermarkets and in picnic, bring food at your doorstep, financed by Bill Gates.
Well, I didn't know that, but thank you for telling us this.
Thank you for that, Paulie. Sanjeva says, sorry, I meant sympathetic, not empathetic. Yeah. In the last post, we got that. Edward says, Anya, did Poland get the 2.4 billion aid package from the EU to help with the refugee costs?
I don't know, actually, Anya, and that's the kind of... Anya might know. I mean, I don't know, to be honest.
Okay, we'll pass that on to
Anya,
and hopefully she'll answer that. Raphael says, love your work. Thank you. Commander Crossfire says, Nigeria is considering joining BRICS and using the Mir card, according to Nigeria's ambassador to Russia. Economic realignment. How will the West retaliate against African countries trying to realign? Same as Libya.
Well, indeed. I mean, try. If you want to try and do the same to Nigeria that you did to Libya, then I would strongly advise against it. We're talking about a huge country and not a small country like Libya. Libya, in terms of its population, is small. Of course, in terms of its territory, it's huge. But Nigeria's population is also huge. I think that would be a crazy idea to try and launch an attack on Nigeria. I think if Nigeria chose to join the BRICS, there's not very much the Western powers could do. I don't know that that's going to happen very soon, but it might indeed happen. I think the fact that Nigeria is moving towards accepting the Mir card is a much bigger event, actually, at least in the short term, and is a clear sign that these attempts to cut off the Russians from the global system are failing. And I think also it shows the success that the Russians are having in Africa.
All right. From Ultra Chaos, Steve says, George Orwell nailed it. The end goal of all this is the United States of Eurasia and endless wars in Asia. We are not far away.
Well, I can see the point that you're making, except that I don't personally see that this Eurasian grouping that's being created is intended to create a superstate. I mean, we mustn't assume that what the European Union has done in Europe, in Western and Central and Eastern Europe, is the game plan in Eurasia. I don't think it is. Putin, at least, is talking very clearly about the need for sovereign states, for power to be returned in effect to the states, and I think that this is what basically they're thinking about. In other words, a concert of states working alongside each other in Eurasia, keeping economic links open, keeping financial links open, trading together, taking similar positions on security issues that concern them. But I don't think we're talking about a superstate. I think that's not on the agenda at all.
Okay, from Frank O'Reilly, thank you for that super chat. Tyler Durden says, are we witnessing the downfall of Europe because nobody wants to fight for the vision the global elites have for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are. I think we're witness. I mean, Europe, to be clear about this, has been in progressive decline ever since the Second World War, ever since the two world wars. I mean, before the world wars, Europe was the centre of the globe. I mean, that was where the big decisions were made. After the world wars, that ceased, and Europe's importance has been steadily and slowly declining. But that decline is now becoming precipitous, and it's accelerating. And the reason it's accelerating is because of the absolutely disastrous quality of European political leadership and the absolutely wrong turns that they've been making, and making consistently ever since the 1980s.
From Angelo, thank you for that super sticker. From David, thank you for that super chat. From Pinyamamba, thank you for that super sticker. Rufus says, thank you for having Anya on the show. I only found her channel. I only found and subscribed to her channel a few days ago. Your shows are the best. Thank you for that. Angela, thank you for that super sticker. RNI says, welcome back, Alex. Zukzuxi says, afternoon all. Have a good day all. Thank you for that. Angelo, thank you for that super chat. And Rufus says, welcome back to YouTube, Alex. I've been watching your videos on Rumble while you were on vacation. Quotes. Thank you for that. Daniela says, will Europeans ever stop voting for their own enslavement? We answered that, but let's answer that again. It's a good question.
Well, it's a very, very good question. I mean, I think they might do. The question is, I'm sorry to be a little careful here, but I mean, with elections, it's not just how people vote, it's how those votes are counted. And, how electoral systems are arranged. And then sometimes you get particular governments elected and they find that they can't do that which they are intended to, which they've been voted to do, either because their leaders are compromised or bribed or intimidated, or because they're undermined. It's not going to be easy at all. So yes, I think that there is huge opposition right across Europe to much of this. But I don't know to what extent that's going to be successful and effective in breaking through the system. I've discussed in previous programs my worry about Europe, which is that we're not going to see a political breakthrough, and eventually what we're going to get instead is a systems collapse. And, sometimes I'm a bit more hopeful, sometimes I'm a bit more pessimistic. At the moment, I think I lean more to the pessimism than to the optimism, that rather than a big breakthrough, we will probably see a systems collapse at some point.
From Gus, glad you're back on YouTube. Alex from Red Viking, Jackson Hinkle still in the gulag, but welcome back. Alex from Ultra Chaos, Steve says, the whole situation makes me sad. I served with the British Army in the 80s, based near the East German border under the threat of nuclear war. When the Berlin Wall came down, it was such a time of hope, but here we are again.
Yeah, I mean, we threw away the massive opportunity that was created at the end of the Cold War. Short-sighted leaders, the neocons in the US with their plans, the globalists, who, as I said, are, I think, ultimately a European phenomenon with their plans too. They hijacked the victory, the success of the end of the Cold War. They wanted to pursue their agendas, and they've led us into a disaster. And by the way, they show no understanding or recognition of the fact they're continuing exactly in the same direction that they did previously.
From Yov, my father, born in Poland, used to say, who that is a donkey will eat straw. We covered that as well.
I think we covered that one during the program.
Yes. Jennifer says, we also covered this one, but this is a good one to answer again. Jennifer says, I have been reading Olga Tokarczuk's latest book, The Books of Jacob, English translation, a very long novel, total 991 pages from Olga's books. It leads me to believe that the Polish people hate Americans.
Yeah, I think Anya answered that. I think she said
Anya
that some do. But that there is still huge a belief, sometimes naive belief, in Poland amongst many Polish people about America, and I think that's obviously the case. You find that in many places, by the way. People still cling on to their ideas about America, whereas I think I can truthfully say, that I have massive admiration for much that America has achieved, for a lot about American culture, society, economy, those sort of things. But I have no illusions. And I think that's a point that, I think we've made that abundantly clear in our many programs about the country.
Yes. From Eric, thank you for that super sticker. From Gus, Poland in the West needs more people like Anya.
Yeah.
From Sparky, coal has much more energy density than other fuels.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
From
That's
Jam
why we're not going to use
it. It's true. Jam says, glad you're back, Alex. Followed you in Rumble. Big Bush Ape Hooters 1234 says, good to see Bearded Alex back. Fantastic work as usual. Sparky says, America survives on its past reputation.
Let's not use the word survives, because as I said, I still believe, I firmly believe that whatever crises will come, the United States will still be there at the end of it. I mean, I think they still have enormous resilience and resources and abilities, and which must not be underestimated. But what I think is true is that, to a dangerous extent, the American leadership still lives in the past and trades on the past. I think many of them still imagine that it's, America as it was in, 1995 or something.
From Steve HKH says, good you're back on YouTube, Alex, Truth Seekers. Brandon Fisher says, Alex is back. Thank you guys for your diligent daily work. You're both a blessing to me. Amanda, thank you for that super chat. Julia, thank you for that super sticker. Sparky says, a generic borderless world would be quite boring.
Yeah, completely agree. Absolutely.
Julia,
I mean, come back to what Anya said. Anya said, each country being itself is much more interesting and a far more attractive world than everybody being the same. I mean, I would have thought that was obvious.
Yeah. I would have thought that was obvious as well. From Julia, thank you for that super chat. M. Bolton says, look who's back, YouTube dissident, smooth criminal. M. Bolton also says, I've missed Alex's daily updates. Guys, keep it up your work. It is essential for the light of truth, rationality, and logic has been suspended in the West. Bobby Jokal, thank you for that super chat. Rafik says, excellent podcast. Anya has been insightful. Enjoyed your discussion. Would kindly also consider interviewing Dr. E. Michael Jones, author of Bearing Metal, Libido Dominandi, and Logos Rising.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Rafik. M. Bolton says, I wonder if Putin stood in elections in the EU countries, how many votes, how many would vote for him, considering his achievements in Russia, his diplomatic skills, and his concern for his people?
Well, there's nobody similar to Putin in any part of the West. And that's one of the problems, but it's one of the reasons I think they get on so, their relationship with him is so difficult, because the Europeans just can't get their minds around what he's all about. And I think he also, to a great extent, reminds them of the kind of leaders that the West used to have. I'm going to be absolutely straightforward about this. I think if a leader like Putin emerged, or a politician like Putin emerged anywhere in the West at the moment, he wouldn't get anywhere. They'd all gang up against him. They'd do everything they possibly could to block him. And he'd never get anywhere close to the point where people would be able to vote for him. I think that's the tragedy.
Yeah. From Sentinel, great content as usual. Get yourselves a couple of ice-cold Polish beers on this lovely sunny day.
Absolutely. Very good beer. A wonderful beer made in Poland. Very easy to get in London, by the way. Lots of Polish people here, and they like their beer.
Yeah. Pinya Mamba, thank you for that super sticker. Divine Insurgent says, many of the same scummy politicians that were saying stay home, save lives are trying to prolong this war for as long as possible. Is this a false comparison since they were addressing citizens?
No, it's not. I think it's a very good comparison. And can I just say, I'm absolutely seething this morning about the latest British intelligence report. Now, there's a lot of fighting going on in Ukraine at the moment, in Donbass, but it's clear that the Russians are in the process of regrouping and regathering their forces for the next offensive. So what do the British do? They say that this is the opportunity for Ukraine to mount a counteroffensive. In other words, that they should use this period of time to launch a counterstrike on the Russians who supposedly have run out of steam. In other words, it's the British goading the Ukrainians into conducting an offensive, an offensive which I'm absolutely sure if the Ukrainians lack the strength to do, but that tells you where the pressure to continue the war is actually coming from.
From Rafik, can you ask Anya if she has ever heard of Dr. E. Michael Jones and his book Libido Dominante, Sexual Liberation and Political Control? He gave a speech in Poland several years ago. I believe she answered that.
I think she did.
As well, during the live stream.
Yeah.
Summer of 1970, thank you for that super sticker. Julia says, how do you assess the decision of Latvian parliament to dismantle all monuments to the soldiers of the Red Army who fought the Nazis in 1941 to 1945?
Well, I think it is a terrible thing. I mean, put aside whatever personal feelings you may have about Russia. And I understand a lot of people in Latvia have strong feelings about Russia and of course the Soviet period. But I mean, these soldiers who fought the Germans at that time were not themselves, the principal executors, the principal policymakers in that time in Russia. And I don't think anybody who has any objective understanding of the history would understand that the sacrifice that those soldiers made was absolutely vital to secure the end of what was an absolutely terrible and monstrous regime. So pulling down all these monuments to all of these people, to my mind, it kicks all that in the face, all that memory of what those people did and the sacrifices they made in the face. And I think that's a terrible thing. And it's small-minded, it's petty, and it's fundamentally wrong.
From Sanjeva, Alexander will attest to this. Indian media is owned by pro-American Anglo-Indians, especially the English-speaking media. It's not a good barometer for the general consensus, but clearly the trend is towards pro-Russia.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that's entirely correct, actually. By the way, I should say that it's a particularly difficult media, despite the fact that it's in English, to really get a handle on. Because the other thing I find about the Indian media is that it is overwhelmingly, in fact, I think dangerously over-focused on internal events, domestic events in India. Now, one understands why. It's a huge country and, lots going on there and things of this kind. But a country that is now trying to assert itself as a world power needs to have an informed public about the world as well. And I don't think the Indian media is providing that service to the Indian people to anything like the extent to which it should.
From Bauke, listening with bated breath. I didn't know Anya, but her presentation of the Polish situation is hugely intense.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Summer of 1970, thank you for that super sticker. Osax, thank you for that super chat. Daniela, thank you for that super sticker. Serge, thank you for that super sticker. Constanza says, things to remember, Kaczynski is Marxist revisionist. He is interested in power only. He does not care about economics. He does not understand it.
Well, I think Anya responded to that. I mean, as far as she's concerned, Kaczynski is now very much a fading figure in Polish political life. And since I heard her say that, I've confirmed that with some other people, and they all tell me the same thing. And I think that's important because, like a lot of people outside Poland, I've tended to think that Kaczynski is a more powerful figure in Polish politics than he actually is. So Kaczynski, whatever he was in the past, however powerful he was previously, he's no longer the main decision maker in Poland anymore.
And that is 1 second. No, that's not everything. One more is from Euro Gabor. Can you see potential domino effect of the social collapse of the West to hit Central and East European countries? After 145 days of war, 834,000 refugees arrived to Hungary. 90% of them left to the West.
I think there is already a domino effect. I think that Anya discussed this. There's clearly a big impact, a huge impact on Poland. And I think that will have a ripple effect across Europe. Can I repeat again? If the war in Ukraine ends in the kind of debacle that I foresee, then it will have a massive impact on events in Europe. What I don't know is what will happen. I mean, will the European elite, will they withstand the blow, the shock, and then tighten their grip even more because they become even more frightened? Or will this be enough to sort of send the whole tottering thing crumbling? I'm simply not sure. My guess is the first rather than the second, but don't underestimate the scale of the shock.
All right, that is everything from the live stream with Anya Take care.